The demolition notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, slapped against the cracked glass door of Lincoln Community Center like a death warrant. Marcus Williams ran his fingers across the embossed letterhead, his trained touch reading the raised seal of Sterling Development Corporation. The Braille translation would come later, but the aggressive tone of the legal document was already clear from the sharp whispers and worried murmurs of the staff gathering around him. 30 days, whispered Janet Martinez, the center's aging director, her voice cracking like the building's foundation. They're giving us 30 days to vacate. Marcus adjusted Rex's harness, feeling the German shepherd's muscles tense, as if the dog could sense the predatory nature of the document. For 4 years, this community center had been their second home, where Marcus worked night security, where neighborhood kids learned to swim in the chlorinated pool that reeked of industrial cleaner, where elderly residents played dominoes under fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. "On what grounds?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "Structural integrity concerns," Janet read aloud, her bureaucratic training taking over. "Immediate safety violations, failure to meet updated city building codes." The lies came so easily from Sterling Development's legal department. Marcus had walked every inch of this building for years, his heightened senses cataloguing every creak, every settling beam, every hairline crack in the walls. The Lincoln Community Center was solid, built in 1952, with the kind of over-engineered construction that could survive another 50 years. But Victoria Sterling didn't care about structural integrity. She cared about the waterfront view. 3 blocks away, in her glass tower that pierced the Detroit skyline like a chrome needle, Victoria Sterling stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the very neighborhood she intended to erase. At 52, she wore her ambition like designer armor, a tailored Armani suit that cost more than most families in Corktown made in 6 months, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon that revealed diamond earrings worth more than the community center's annual budget. "The Lincoln property acquisition is proceeding on schedule," she informed her assistant, Connor Webb, without turning from the window. Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone who had never heard the word no without immediately destroying whoever dared speak it. "I want those people out by Christmas. Nothing says urban renewal like breaking ground on luxury condos while the snow covers up the mess." Connor, a nervous 20-something fresh from law school, shifted uncomfortably behind her. "Ma'am, there might be some pushback from the community. The center serves over 300 families, and there are several disabled residents who—" Victoria's laugh cut through his concerns like breaking glass. "Disabled residents? You mean the blind security guard and his mongrel?" She finally turned, her ice-blue eyes reflecting the same cold calculation as the windows behind her. "Connor, sweetie, let me educate you about urban development. Sentimentality is a luxury we can't afford. These people have been living in subsidized squalor for decades. We're doing them a favor by forcing them into better neighborhoods. But the legal challenges will be handled by our friends in the Planning Commission." Victoria moved to her desk, a slab of imported Italian marble that cost more than most people's cars. She pulled out a thick folder labeled Lincoln Demolition, Phase 1, and dropped it with deliberate force. "Every permit has been expedited. Every inspection has been influenced. Every city council member who matters has been reminded of their campaign contributions." What Victoria Sterling didn't know, what her arrogance prevented her from seeing, was that her perfect system had a flaw. A 4-year-old German shepherd with keen instincts and an owner who had spent 6 years in army intelligence before an IED stole his sight, but sharpened every other sense to razor precision. Rex had been acting strange for weeks, his usual disciplined behavior replaced by an almost obsessive need to patrol the neighborhood. During their evening walks, the dog would stop at seemingly random locations, a boarded-up apartment building here, a condemned house there, his nose working overtime as if cataloguing scents that told a story Marcus couldn't yet read. But Marcus was beginning to understand that story. the pattern of accidental fires, the sudden rash of building collapses. The families displaced just months before Sterling Development swooped in with cash offers for the newly vacant lots. Rex wasn't just a guide dog anymore. He had become a witness to systematic urban terrorism. As Victoria Sterling celebrated her latest acquisition from her ivory tower, Marcus Williams stood in the community centre's main hall, surrounded by the echoing voices of children who had no idea their safe haven was about to be stolen from them. His fingers traced the demolition notice one more time, memorizing every word, every threat, every legal justification for organized cruelty. 28 more days until Sterling's deadline. 28 days to prove that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who's been quietly watching, listening, and remembering every mistake you've made while assuming no one important was paying attention. Rex pressed against Marcus's leg, a silent promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. If this story of corruption and community resilience has caught your attention, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. The fight for justice is just beginning, and Marcus Williams is about to prove that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most devastating truths. 6 months earlier, Marcus Williams had noticed the first anomaly during his 2 a.m. patrol of the Lincoln Community Center. Rex had stopped dead in front of the bulletin board, his ears pricked forward in that particular way that meant danger. But there was nothing visible, just the usual collection of community notices, job postings, and city announcements that Janet updated weekly. Marcus ran his fingers across the papers until he found what Rex had detected. A new posting, hastily tacked up, the paper still warm from a printer. His smartphone's accessibility app read it aloud in that mechanical voice he'd grown to depend on. Notice of Preliminary Structural Assessment, Sterling Development Corp. The first piece of the puzzle. Over the following months, Marcus had developed what his Army intelligence training called pattern recognition through systematic observation. Every evening after his security shift, he would walk Rex through the neighborhood, mapping the subtle changes that sighted people missed. The dog's behavior became his early warning system. Rex could smell fear, stress, and most importantly, the chemical signatures of accelerants and explosives that lingered long after accidents occurred. The burned-out shell of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house still reeked of gasoline 3 weeks after the electrical fire. Rex had led Marcus to the basement access point where someone had poured accelerant along the foundation. The building inspector's report, which Janet had obtained through a FOIA request, claimed faulty wiring in the kitchen. But the kitchen was on the second floor, and the burn patterns Rex detected started in the basement. Marcus had begun recording everything. His iPhone, equipped with specialized apps for the visually impaired, became his primary investigative tool. He recorded ambient sounds during Rex's alerts, footsteps fleeing scenes, car engines starting at suspicious hours, voices carrying on phone conversations near demolition sites. His apartment wall now displayed a tactile map of the neighborhood, marked with thumbtacks and string-connecting incident locations. The pattern emerged like a constellation of corruption. Every accidental fire, every structural collapse, every gas leak explosion occurred within a 3-block radius of properties Sterling Development had quietly attempted to purchase in the previous 6 months. The city's response was always the same: immediate condemnation, rapid demolition for public safety, and the land auctioned off below market value to the highest bidder, who somehow always turned out to be Sterling Development Corporation. But Victoria Sterling's arrogance had led to sloppiness. Marcus discovered this during a conversation with Tom Rivera, a former Army explosive specialist who now worked for Detroit's Fire Investigation Unit. Tom owed Marcus a favor. Marcus had saved his life during a patrol in Afghanistan when an IED buried Tom under rubble for 6 hours. Over beers at O'Malley's pub, Tom had confided something that made Marcus's blood run cold. The accelerant patterns don't match the official reports. Tom had whispered, glancing around the crowded bar. "Someone with professional training is setting these fires. Military-grade techniques. Clean entry, strategic placement, designed to look accidental, but guaranteed to cause total structural failure. Any suspects? Sterling Development uses a private security firm called Blackwater Solutions. 3 of their contractors are former special forces, dishonorably discharged for excessive force incidents." Tom's voice dropped even lower. "Word is they're not just providing security anymore." Marcus had Rex guide him to the bar's bathroom, where he immediately called his contact at the VA, Dr. Sarah Kim, who helped veterans navigate disability benefits. But Dr. Kim had connections beyond the medical system. Her brother worked for the FBI's domestic terrorism unit. "Marcus, what you're describing sounds like a RICO case," Dr. Kim had explained during their phone call. "Systematic arson for financial gain, conspiracy to commit fraud, possible federal crimes. But you need evidence that would hold up in court." Evidence. That's what Marcus had been gathering for 6 months. His apartment had become an intelligence operations center that would have impressed his former commanding officers. Voice recordings were transcribed and catalogued. Dates, times and locations cross-referenced with city permits and Sterling Development's property acquisitions. Rex's behavioral patterns documented like forensic evidence. The dog's nose was more accurate than most police equipment. The breakthrough came when Marcus realized Rex wasn't just detecting accelerants. The dog was tracking specific human scents. German shepherds could distinguish between thousands of individual scent signatures, and Rex had been building a database of everyone involved in Sterling's operation. Marcus had begun following Rex's lead systematically. When the dog showed interest in a particular location, Marcus would position himself nearby with his phone's voice recorder activated. His military training in surveillance techniques, combined with the natural invisibility that society imposed on disabled people, made him the perfect undercover operative. 3 weeks ago, Rex had led him to an alley behind the condemned Morrison apartments, where Marcus recorded a conversation between 2 men discussing making the Lincoln Center problem disappear permanently. The voices were clear enough for audio analysis, and Marcus had captured license plate information using his phone's camera with assistance from a helpful passerby. The evidence was building into an airtight case, but Marcus needed one more piece: direct proof of Sterling's involvement. That proof came yesterday when Rex suddenly bolted during their evening walk, pulling Marcus toward a black SUV parked outside the community center. As they approached, Marcus heard Victoria Sterling's unmistakable voice, cutting through the evening air like a blade. "I don't care about the children's Christmas program," she was saying into her phone, apparently feeling safe behind the SUV's tinted windows. "I need that building empty by December 15th. Use whatever methods necessary. If the structural inspections don't work, manufacture a gas leak. These people need to understand that resistance is futile." Marcus's phone captured every word. Rex had guided him closer, close enough to hear her end the call and immediately dial another number. "Connor, it's Victoria. Accelerate the Lincoln timeline. I want contracts signed on the luxury development before the city council changes in January. And Connor, if that blind security guard becomes a problem, remind him that accidents happen to guide dogs too." The threat against Rex transformed Marcus's methodical evidence gathering into something far more personal. As Victoria's SUV pulled away, Marcus stood in the evening shadows with Rex pressed against his legs, his phone containing the confession that would destroy Sterling Development Corporation. But he knew Victoria Sterling's arrogance would demand a public stage for her final downfall. He wouldn't have to wait long. What detail from Marcus's investigation caught your attention the most? Was it Rex's incredible detection abilities, the military precision of the arsons, or Victoria's callous threats? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights help us understand what aspects of corruption and justice resonate most with our community. The Lincoln Community Center's annual Christmas fundraiser was supposed to be a celebration. Paper snowflakes hung from the gymnasium ceiling, children's artwork decorated the walls, and the smell of Janet's homemade cookies mixed with the chlorine scent from the adjacent pool. Families crowded around folding tables, their donations filling mason jars marked "Save Our Center," a desperate attempt to raise enough money to fight Sterling Development's demolition order. Marcus stood near the back wall with Rex, listening to the conversations swirling around him. Worried parents discussed finding new after-school programs. Elderly residents wondered where they'd go for their daily exercise classes. Teenagers who'd learned to swim in this pool talked about losing their part-time jobs as lifeguards and maintenance helpers. Victoria Sterling's arrival shattered the evening's fragile hope like a brick through stained glass. She swept through the main entrance wearing a white wool coat that probably cost more than the fundraiser's target goal, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum with the sharp percussion of authority. Behind her marched Connor Webb and two men in expensive suits, lawyers by their predatory posture, along with a photographer whose camera flash began documenting everything with clinical precision. The conversations died instantly. Even the children seemed to sense that something terrible had entered their sanctuary. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria announced, her voice carrying the false warmth of a politician at a photo opportunity, "I hope you'll forgive the interruption of your quaint little gathering." Janet Martinez stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady. "Ms. Sterling, this is a private community event. You weren't invited." Victoria's smile could have flash-frozen the gymnasium. "Oh, Janet, sweetheart, I don't need an invitation. You see, I own this building now." She gestured toward Connor, who produced a thick folder with the theatrical flourish of a magician revealing a trick. "As of 4 p.m. today, Sterling Development Corporation holds the mortgage on this property. The previous holders were happy to sell once they understood the financial benefits of cooperation." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could hear Rex's breathing change, the dog's tension radiating through the harness as if he sensed the predator that had invaded their territory. "That's impossible," Janet whispered. "The Community Foundation owns this building. It's been ours for 70 years. Was yours," Victoria corrected, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Apparently your foundation board didn't read the fine print on those emergency loans they took out during COVID. Very sad, really. Such trusting people, assuming everyone operates with the same noble intentions." Marcus felt his phone vibrating in his pocket, a reminder alarm he'd set for 7:30 p.m., time for the evening's main event. He moved slightly forward, Rex guiding him through the crowd with practiced precision. "Of course," Victoria continued, now clearly enjoying her audience's despair. "I'm not unreasonable. Sterling Development is prepared to offer relocation assistance to those families who cooperate with our timeline. We have a lovely apartment complex in Pontiac that would be perfect for people of your economic circumstances." "Pontiac is 40 miles away," protested Maria Santos, whose 3 children attended the center's after-school program. "My kids would have to change schools. I'd lose my job." "Change is difficult," Victoria interrupted with mock concern. "But sometimes we have to make sacrifices for progress. This neighborhood is being transformed into something beautiful, something valuable. Luxury waterfront condominiums that will bring in the kind of residents Detroit needs to rebuild its tax base." An elderly man named Robert Jackson, who used the center's fitness equipment to manage his diabetes, stood up with the slow dignity of someone who'd survived 8 decades of disappointment. "And what about us? What about the people who've lived here all our lives?" Victoria's mask of false sympathy finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Mr. Jackson, isn't it? I've reviewed the demographics. Most of you are on fixed incomes, living in subsidized housing, contributing very little to the city's economic growth. Frankly, you're holding back Detroit's renaissance." The gymnasium erupted in angry voices. Parents shouted questions about their children's programs. Elderly residents demanded to know where they were supposed to go. The photographer's camera flash continued strobing, documenting the community's anguish for whatever propaganda Sterling Development planned to produce. Marcus Williams stepped forward. His movement was deliberate, calm, cutting through the chaos like a ship through storm waters. Rex guided him directly toward Victoria Sterling, the crowd parting instinctively as they recognized the quiet authority in his approach. "Ms. Sterling," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily across the noise without being raised, "I have a question." Victoria turned toward him with the condescending smile reserved for inconvenient people. "Of course, Mr. Williams, Marcus Williams. I work security here." He paused, letting Rex settle into a perfect heel position. "I was wondering about the structural integrity issues mentioned in your demolition order." "What about them?" Victoria's tone suggested she was humoring a child. "Well, I've walked every inch of this building for 4 years. My partner here," Marcus indicated Rex, "has inspected every corner, every room, every potential safety hazard. Could you be more specific about which structural problems your engineers identified?" Connor Webb whispered something urgent in Victoria's ear, but she waved him off with obvious irritation. "Mr. Williams, I hardly think your unique perspective qualifies you to assess structural engineering reports." The insult hit its target perfectly. Marcus had anticipated her arrogance would compel her to reveal more than she intended. "You're absolutely right," Marcus agreed pleasantly. "I'm just curious about the timing. These supposed structural problems, when exactly did they develop? Because the city's last inspection, completed 6 months ago, gave this building a clean safety certificate." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "Structural deterioration can happen rapidly, especially in buildings of this age." "Especially," Marcus interrupted gently, "when someone helps it along." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria's face flushed red, her composure finally cracking under the pressure of Marcus's calm certainty. "Are you suggesting? How dare you imply—" She stepped closer to Marcus, her voice rising to a near shout. "You have no idea what you're talking about, you blind—" She caught herself before finishing the slur, but the damage was done. The photographer's camera captured her rage, her loss of control, the moment when her mask slipped completely. Marcus simply smiled and pulled out his phone. "Actually, Ms. Sterling, I think I understand the situation perfectly. Should I call the fire department to report the safety violations, or would you prefer to explain to the authorities yourself why Rex here has been detecting accelerant residue at every one of your accident sites?" Victoria Sterling's world began crumbling in real time as she realized the blind security guard had just checkmated her in front of 50 witnesses and a photographer. The confrontation is heating up. Like this video and subscribe to our channel to see how Marcus's quiet confidence completely dismantles Victoria's arrogant assumptions. The real fireworks are just beginning. Victoria Sterling's face went through a spectrum of emotions in the span of 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, and then pure, undiluted rage. The realization that a blind security guard had been systematically documenting her criminal enterprise hit her like a physical blow. "You're bluffing," she hissed, but her voice carried the tremor of someone whose carefully constructed world was suddenly revealing hairline cracks. A blind man and his mutt couldn't possibly— Marcus's phone was already dialing. The number connected immediately to Detective Lieutenant Sarah Chen of Detroit PD's Major Crimes Unit, a contact Marcus had cultivated 3 months earlier when Rex first detected accelerants at the Morrison Apartments fire. Chen owed her promotion partly to tips Marcus had provided about drug operations he'd overheard during his night security rounds. "Lieutenant Chen, this is Marcus Williams at Lincoln Community Center. We have a situation here that requires immediate attention." His voice remained perfectly calm, a stark contrast to Victoria's increasingly erratic behavior. "I have evidence of arson conspiracy, and I'm standing next to the person responsible." Victoria lunged forward, her manicured hand reaching for Marcus's phone. "You can't. This is harassment. I'll have you arrested for—" Rex's training kicked in instantly. The German shepherd positioned himself between Victoria and Marcus, not aggressively, but with the unmistakable presence of a 75-pound early warning system. Victoria stumbled backward, her designer heels catching on the worn linoleum. "Ma'am, I need you to step back," Marcus said firmly, still holding the phone. "Lieutenant Chen, the suspect just attempted to interfere with my call to police. We also have approximately 50 witnesses to threats made against community members and their property." Connor Webb grabbed Victoria's arm, his young face pale with panic. "Ms. Sterling, we should leave immediately. Our legal team can handle this through proper channels." "Shut up, Connor!" Victoria snapped, her composure completely shattered. She turned back to Marcus, her voice rising to a near shriek. "You think you're clever? You think anyone will believe a disabled nobody over me? I own this city. I own half the police department." The photographer's camera flash strobed frantically, capturing every moment of Victoria's meltdown for posterity. The community center's fundraiser had transformed into something far more dramatic, a public execution of Sterling Development's reputation, broadcast in real time. Marcus heard the sirens before anyone else, Rex's ears twitching at frequencies beyond human perception. "Lieutenant Chen will be here in approximately 2 minutes, he announced to the crowd. "I recommend everyone remain calm and stay available as witnesses." Victoria's panic crystallized into desperate calculation. She spun toward Janet Martinez, pointing an accusatory finger. "This is a setup. They planned this. That man has been stalking my company, harassing my employees." "Actually," Marcus interrupted gently, "I've been documenting crime. There's a significant difference." The gymnasium doors burst open as Lieutenant Sarah Chen arrived with 3 patrol officers and a detective Marcus recognized by his heavy footsteps, Detective Ray Morrison. A 20-year veteran whose methodical approach to investigation had earned him a legendary reputation in Detroit's criminal justice system. Chen was a compact woman in her 40s whose steel-grey eyes missed nothing. She surveyed the scene with the clinical assessment of someone who'd walked into hundreds of volatile situations. Her gaze moved from Victoria's disheveled appearance to Marcus's calm demeanor, immediately recognizing which person represented the real threat. "Mr. Williams," Chen said, her voice carrying easy authority. "You mentioned evidence of arson conspiracy." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket, producing a small digital recorder and his smartphone. 6 months of documented conversations, Rex's behavioral patterns indicating accelerant detection at multiple fire sites, and recorded threats made by Ms. Sterling approximately 18 hours ago. Victoria stepped forward, her lawyer instincts finally overriding her panic. "Lieutenant, this man has been conducting illegal surveillance of my company. Any recordings he claims to have would be inadmissible." "Ma'am," Detective Morrison interrupted, his gravelly voice cutting through her objections. "I need you to remain silent until we've assessed the situation." He turned to Marcus. "Mr. Williams, these recordings, were they made in public spaces or private conversations?" "Public spaces exclusively," Marcus replied. "Michigan is a one-party consent state for recordings, and I was present for every conversation documented. Additionally, Rex's detection of accelerants at fire sites represents physical evidence that can be independently verified." Chen nodded, pulling out her own recorder. "I need to hear these alleged conversations." Marcus activated his smartphone's voice memo app. Victoria's voice filled the gymnasium with crystal clarity. "I don't care about the children's Christmas program. I need that building empty by December 15th. Use whatever methods necessary. If the structural inspections don't work, manufacture a gas leak." The silence that followed was deafening. 50 community members, 2 lawyers, a photographer, and 4 police officers had just heard a clear confession to conspiracy to commit arson and endangerment of minors. Victoria's face went white. That's taken out of context. It's a private business conversation about legitimate demolition procedures." The second recording played automatically. If that blind security guard becomes a problem, remind him that accidents happen to guide dogs too. Detective Morrison's expression hardened. In 30 years of police work, threats against service animals ranked among his personal triggers. Ma'am, you need to stop talking immediately. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane, Victoria screamed, her voice echoing off the gymnasium walls. You can't arrest me based on some doctored recordings from a blind man. I have rights. I have lawyers. I have city council members who will... Who will what? Chen asked quietly, her recorder capturing every word. Complete that sentence, please. Connor Webb stepped forward, his legal training finally overcoming his loyalty to his employer. Ms. Sterling, as your legal counsel, I strongly advise you to exercise your right to remain silent immediately. But Victoria Sterling's arrogance had carried her too far down the path of self-destruction. She was a woman who had never been told no by anyone who mattered, and the concept of accountability was as foreign to her as poverty or humility. I advise you to remember who pays your salary, Connor, she snapped. And I advise all of you to remember that Sterling Development Corporation employs 3,000 people in this city. We contribute millions in tax revenue. You think you can just arrest me based on some conspiracy theory from a disabled nobody? Detective Morrison clicked his handcuffs with the satisfied precision of a man who just witnessed a suspect talk themselves into a felony conviction. Victoria Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, making terroristic threats, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent. A right I strongly suggest you start exercising immediately. The tables have completely turned. Like this video and subscribe to our channel as we watch Victoria Sterling's arrogance lead to her spectacular downfall. The evidence is about to get even more damning. Detective Morrison's handcuffs clicked shut around Victoria Sterling's wrists with the finality of a vault door closing, but Lieutenant Chen held up a hand before he could escort her to the patrol car. Hold on, Ray. Mr. Williams, you mentioned 6 months of documentation. I need to see the full scope of evidence before we process the suspect. Marcus nodded, pulling out a leather portfolio that had once held his military commendations. Inside were dozens of pages, printed in both standard text and braille, a complete investigative file that would have impressed FBI analysts. Rex, evidence station, he commanded softly. The German shepherd immediately moved to a specific corner of the gymnasium where Marcus had pre-positioned a folding table earlier that evening. This wasn't coincidence. Marcus had anticipated this moment, planned for it with the methodical precision of his military training. The first recording establishes intent and conspiracy, Marcus began, his voice taking on the professional cadence of an intelligence briefing. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. He activated his phone's accessibility app, which began reading aloud from his digital files. November 15th, 2:17 a.m. Rex detected accelerant residue at 1247 Corktown Avenue, the Morrison Apartments. Official fire department report cited electrical failure. Actual burn pattern, as mapped by Rex's behavioral alerts, originated in the basement where electrical systems were not present. Victoria Sterling's face grew paler with each detail. Connor Webb was frantically scribbling notes, his legal training recognizing the meticulous nature of Marcus's documentation. November 22nd, Marcus continued, Sterling Development filed a property acquisition request for the Morrison Apartments lot exactly 48 hours after the fire. Purchase price, $47,000 for land valued at $180,000 by county assessment. Detective Morrison whistled low. That's a hell of a coincidence. It gets better, Marcus said, producing a second device, a specialized audio recorder designed for surveillance work. December 3rd, 8:45 p.m., Rex led me to an alley behind the Patterson boarding house. We recorded this conversation between two unidentified males. The recording played with startling clarity. Two voices discussed timing, accelerant placement, and ensuring no witnesses during what they called the next renovation project. The conversation included specific details about bypassing smoke detectors and creating electrical failure patterns to mask arson evidence. I ran voice analysis through my VA contact at the FBI, Marcus explained. The speakers were identified as Thomas Brennan and Mike Kowalski, both former Special Forces contractors currently employed by Blackwater Solutions, Sterling Development's private security firm. Victoria's breathing became rapid and shallow. This is illegal surveillance. You can't use military contacts to spy on private citizens. Lieutenant Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, but Marcus caught the slight smile in her voice. Ma'am, voice identification of suspects recorded in public spaces committing crimes is standard investigative procedure. Continue, Mr. Williams. Marcus pulled out his smartphone and activated the camera function. Rex's training included explosives detection during our service in Afghanistan. His nose can identify accelerants up to 72 hours after application. But more importantly, he can track individual human scents connected to specific chemical signatures. He turned the phone toward Victoria Sterling, though he couldn't see the screen himself. Rex has been building a scent database of everyone involved in your operation. Would you like to know how many times he's detected your personal scent signature at future arson sites? That's impossible, Victoria stammered. Dogs can't. I've never been to any. Chanel, no. Hive perfume, Hermes leather from your handbags, and a very specific brand of anxiety medication that creates a unique metabolic scent profile, Marcus recited calmly. Rex identified your presence at 4 different properties that burned down between November 15th and December 8th. All 4 sites were visited by someone matching your scent signature approximately 24 to 48 hours before the fires occurred. Detective Morrison leaned forward with professional interest. And you documented these scent alerts? Video documentation of Rex's behavioral patterns at each location, time-stamped and GPS coordinated. Marcus gestured toward his phone. Rex shows specific alert behaviors when detecting both accelerants and familiar human scents. The combination creates a unique response pattern that's been documented by military canine training protocols. Lieutenant Chen was taking rapid notes. This is admissible evidence? Military working dogs are recognized as expert witnesses in federal court, Marcus confirmed. Rex's training records and service history establish him as a qualified explosives and chemical detection specialist. Victoria Sterling's composure finally cracked completely. You can't convict me based on a dog's sense of smell. This is America, not some police state where... Marcus held up his hand for silence, then activated another recording. This time, Victoria's voice was joined by a male voice discussing accelerating the timeline and removing obstacles permanently. December 10th, 7 to 15 p.m., Marcus announced. Ms. Sterling's conversation with Thomas Brennan, planning what she described as the final solution to the Lincoln problem. Note the discussion of creating a gas leak during the children's Christmas program to maximize casualties and ensure total building destruction. The gymnasium fell silent, except for the soft whir of Detective Morrison's body camera recording everything. Even the children had stopped talking, sensing the gravity of what was unfolding. But Marcus wasn't finished. He pulled out a final piece of evidence, a waterproof document case that Rex had retrieved from the ruins of the Morrison apartments. Rex found this during his investigation of the Morrison fire site, Marcus explained, opening the case to reveal charred but readable papers. Internal Sterling Development emails discussing payments to city officials, falsified inspection reports, and a list of 18 properties targeted for renovation through strategic fire damage. Lieutenant Chen examined the documents with growing amazement. These emails are from Sterling Development's internal servers. Someone tried to destroy the evidence, Marcus confirmed, but Rex's training led him to the documents before they could be completely incinerated. The digital forensics team at the FBI can recover the complete files from the partially damaged hard drives Rex also located. Victoria Sterling's legs buckled. If Connor Webb hadn't caught her arm, she would have collapsed entirely. The magnitude of the evidence against her was overwhelming. Months of methodical documentation that painted a picture of systematic urban terrorism for profit. "There's more," Marcus said quietly. "Phone records showing coordination between Sterling Development and city planning officials. Bank records of payments that coincidentally match permit approval dates. And Rex has identified accelerant evidence at 6 additional properties that Sterling Development has acquired after accidental fires." Detective Morrison looked at his partner with the expression of someone who just witnessed the most complete criminal case file he'd seen in 2 decades of police work. "Ms. Sterling," Lieutenant Chen said formally, "you're being arrested for conspiracy to commit arson, multiple counts of arson, conspiracy to commit murder, bribery of public officials, and RICO violations. The federal charges will be handled by the FBI." Victoria Sterling's world collapsed in the span of 10 minutes, destroyed by a blind security guard and his 4-legged partner, who had quietly, methodically, and brilliantly documented every aspect of her criminal enterprise. Marcus Williams stood calmly beside Rex, listening to the handcuffs close around the wrists of a woman who had thought herself untouchable. "The evidence is absolutely devastating. Like this video and subscribe to our channel to see how Victoria Sterling's empire of corruption gets completely dismantled by Marcus's methodical investigation. The final reckoning is about to begin. Victoria Sterling's perp walk through the Lincoln Community Center became the most photographed moment of her life and the end of everything she had built. The woman who had entered the gymnasium in a $3,000 white wool coat now stumbled toward the exit in handcuffs, her perfect composure shattered into 1,000 pieces. Detective Morrison guided her with professional efficiency, but Victoria's legs seemed to have forgotten how to work properly. The weight of 30 federal charges and a lifetime in prison had a way of affecting one's motor functions. "This isn't over," she hissed at Marcus as they passed him. "I have lawyers. I have connections. I have had," Marcus corrected quietly. "Past tense, Miss Sterling." Lieutenant Chen was already coordinating with federal agents who had arrived with remarkable speed, a sign that Marcus's FBI contact had been monitoring the situation closely. Agent Patricia Walsh, a severe woman in her 50s who specialized in white-collar crime, took possession of the evidence with the reverence of someone handling ancient artifacts. "Mr. Williams," Agent Walsh said, her voice carrying the clipped authority of federal law enforcement, "this is the most complete RICO case file we've seen in a decade. 6 months of documentation, voice recordings, chemical evidence, financial records, its prosecutorial goal. But the real spectacle was Connor Webb's transformation from loyal attorney to cooperating witness. The young lawyer's ethical training finally overcame his fear of unemployment as he realized the magnitude of Sterling's criminal enterprise. "Agent Walsh," Connor said, his voice shaking but determined, "I have additional evidence. Internal company emails, recorded phone conversations between Ms. Sterling and city officials, and documentation of bribes paid to expedite demolition permits." Victoria spun around with the fury of a cornered predator. "Connor, you worthless little, I made your career. Without me, you're nothing." "Without you," Connor replied with newfound courage, "I might still have my law license at the end of this." The federal agents were particularly interested in Connor's phone, which contained text message chains between Victoria and Councilman Robert Hayes, discussing contributions that coincidentally preceded every fast-tracked demolition permit. The corruption web was unraveling in real time. Marcus listened to the chaos with the satisfaction of a chess master, watching his opponent realize they'd been in checkmate for months without knowing it. Rex pressed against his leg, the dog's training keeping him calm despite the swirling activity around them. "Miss Sterling," Agent Walsh announced formally, "based on the evidence presented, you're being charged under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Federal charges include conspiracy to commit arson, resulting in endangerment of human life, bribery of public officials, mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. The photographer who had accompanied Victoria, intended to document her triumphant acquisition of community property, was now capturing her complete destruction. Each flash illuminated another moment of her fall, the handcuffs cutting into her wrists, the mascara streaking down her cheeks, the white wool coat now stained with sweat and humiliation. But Marcus had saved the most devastating revelation for last. "Agent Walsh," he said, producing a final folder from Rex's evidence station. "There's one more piece of information Ms. Sterling should know before she leaves." Victoria's head snapped up with desperate hope. Perhaps this blind security guard was about to offer her some kind of deal, some way to minimize the damage to her empire. Marcus opened the folder with deliberate ceremony. "The baby that Rex died saving from the Morrison Apartments fire, the child whose rescue cost me my partner and best friend, has been identified." The gymnasium fell silent. Even the federal agents paused their evidence cataloging to listen. "Baby Michael Sterling Rodriguez," Marcus announced clearly. "Born October 15th to James Rodriguez and Sarah Sterling Rodriguez. Sarah Sterling Rodriguez, formerly Sarah Sterling, daughter of Victoria Sterling." Victoria's face went white as bone. "That's impossible. Sarah is... She's been living in subsidized housing for 18 months, ever since you disowned her for marrying a Latino construction worker." Marcus continued relentlessly. "The baby Rex died saving is your grandson, Miss Sterling. The building you ordered burned down contained your own flesh and blood." The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her designer heels slipping on the worn linoleum. "Sarah, the baby, I didn't know." "Rex knew," Marcus said softly. "Dogs don't see color or class or bank accounts. He just saw a child in danger and gave his life to save him. While you were planning to murder families for profit, my partner was actually protecting your family." Victoria Sterling collapsed completely, her legs finally giving out as the full weight of her actions crashed down on her. She had spent months orchestrating the systematic destruction of her own neighborhood, had personally threatened the man whose dog died saving her grandson's life, had planned mass murder that would have included her own family. Detective Morrison helped her back to her feet, but Victoria Sterling was no longer the arrogant real estate mogul who had entered the community center an hour earlier. She was a broken woman who had discovered that her empire of corruption was built on the ashes of her own soul. "The irony," Marcus observed as the federal agents prepared to escort Victoria to their waiting vehicles, "is that if you had simply visited your daughter, if you had shown any interest in her life or her child's welfare, Rex would never have been in that building. Your grandson would have been living somewhere safe, and none of this would have been necessary." Victoria's last words before being loaded into the federal vehicle were barely audible. "Sarah, where is Sarah? I need to... But it was too late for maternal concern. 26 counts of federal crimes, a RICO investigation that would dismantle her entire organization, and the knowledge that her own arrogance had nearly killed her grandson. Victoria Sterling's fall was complete. As the federal vehicles pulled away into the Detroit night, Marcus Williams stood in the community center with Rex's leash still in his hand, listening to the sound of justice being served with methodical precision. The community center was safe, the neighborhood was safe, and somewhere in Detroit, a baby boy would grow up never knowing that his grandmother's greed had almost cost him his life, or that a German shepherd named Rex had considered that child's safety worth dying for. Victoria Sterling's empire has crumbled completely. Like this video and subscribe to our channel as we move toward the final chapter of this incredible story of justice, sacrifice, and the bond between a veteran and his heroic partner. 3 months after Victoria Sterling's arrest, the federal courthouse in downtown Detroit had become the epicenter of the largest municipal corruption case in the city's history. The RICO prosecution had metastasized beyond Sterling Development Corporation, engulfing city council members, building inspectors, and fire department officials in a web of evidence that Marcus Williams and Rex had helped weave. U.S. Attorney Margaret Chen, Lieutenant Chen's sister and a prosecutor with a reputation for dismantling organized crime, stood before Judge Harrison Matthews, presenting what legal experts were calling the most comprehensive corruption case in Michigan history. "Your Honor," Attorney Chen announced, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority, "the evidence presented demonstrates a conspiracy spanning 4 years involving systematic arson, bribery of public officials, and what can only be described as domestic terrorism for profit." Marcus sat in the gallery's front row, his hand resting on the memorial collar he'd had made for Rex, a simple leather band with the dog's service tags, and a small brass plaque reading "Hero." The courtroom's acoustics allowed him to follow every word of the proceedings with perfect clarity. Victoria Sterling looked nothing like the imperious real estate mogul who had terrorized communities for years. 3 months in federal custody had aged her a decade. Her platinum blonde hair had grown out to reveal grey roots. Her designer suits replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Her arrogance replaced by the hollow stare of someone who had lost everything. The evidence presentation took 6 hours over 2 days. Connor Webb, now a key federal witness, methodically detailed Sterling Development's criminal operations with the precision of someone trying to save his own legal career. His testimony revealed a conspiracy that reached into every level of Detroit's municipal government. Ms. Sterling maintained detailed records of every bribe paid, Connor testified, his voice steady but ashamed. She called it her insurance policy, evidence that could implicate her co-conspirators if they ever turned against her. Those records were now federal evidence. Councilman Robert Hayes had been arrested at his home after bank records revealed $847,000 in payments from Sterling Development over 3 years. Fire Inspector Dale Morrison, no relation to Detective Morrison, had been charged with falsifying safety reports after investigators found his signature on documents certifying buildings he'd never actually visited. But the most devastating testimony came from an unexpected source. Sarah Sterling Rodriguez, Victoria's estranged daughter, entered the courtroom carrying baby Michael, now 6 months old and healthy despite his traumatic first weeks of life. Sarah's appearance was a deliberate choice. She wanted her mother to see the grandson whose life Rex had saved, the family Victoria had been willing to sacrifice for profit. "My mother disowned me when I married Miguel," Sarah testified, her voice clear despite the tears. "She said I was ruining the Sterling name by associating with those people. She cut off all financial support and told me never to contact her again." Judge Matthews leaned forward with interest. "And where were you living during the arson incidents?" "The Morrison Apartments, Your Honor, Unit 2B. Miguel and I could barely afford the rent, but it was all we could manage after Mum cut us off." Sarah's voice caught slightly. "If that dog hadn't found Michael during the fire, if that brave animal hadn't died protecting my son." Victoria Sterling began sobbing in her defendant's chair, the sound echoing off the courtroom's marble walls like a confession of guilt. For the first time in months, she was seeing the human cost of her actions, not just statistics or property values, but her own flesh and blood. U.S. Attorney Chen presented the final piece of evidence that would seal Sterling's fate: the recovered hard drives Rex had found in the Morrison Apartments fire. FBI digital forensics had reconstructed thousands of emails detailing Sterling Development's criminal enterprise. The emails revealed a company culture of systematic cruelty. Internal memos discussed targeting undesirable populations for displacement. Strategic plans outlined accelerating gentrification through managed building failures. Most damning were Victoria's personal emails celebrating successful arsons as urban renewal victories. One email, sent just days before Rex's death, read, "The Lincoln Community Center represents the last obstacle to Phase 3 development. Recommend immediate structural failure event. during maximum occupancy period for greatest psychological impact on remaining residents. Maximum occupancy period. Victoria Sterling had planned to murder children during their Christmas program to maximize the terror effect on surviving families. Judge Matthews reviewed the sentencing recommendations with the gravity befitting a case that had exposed the rot at the heart of urban development. Ms. Sterling, the evidence against you is overwhelming. 26 federal counts of conspiracy, arson, bribery, and racketeering. The prosecution has recommended life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Victoria's lawyer, a public defender after her assets were frozen, stood weakly. Your Honor, my client expresses deep remorse for her actions and requests the court's mercy in consideration of her cooperation with ongoing investigations. Cooperation? Judge Matthews examined the case files. According to the record, Ms. Sterling has refused to provide information about additional co-conspirators and has shown no remorse except for being caught. Marcus Williams stood slowly, Rex's memorial collar in his hands. Your Honor, may I address the court? Judge Matthews nodded. Mr. Williams, your evidence gathering was instrumental in exposing this conspiracy. Please proceed. Marcus moved to the witness stand with the careful dignity of someone who had served his country and lost his partner in service to his community. Your Honor, members of the court, Rex and I didn't seek revenge against Victoria Sterling. We sought justice for families who couldn't protect themselves. His voice carried clearly through the courtroom's marble silence. Rex died saving a baby whose grandmother was planning to kill him for profit. That dog showed more humanity in his final moments than Miss Sterling displayed in years of systematic cruelty. Victoria looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes, perhaps hoping for forgiveness or mercy from the man whose life she had destroyed. Marcus continued, without acknowledging her gaze. I don't want vengeance against Ms. Sterling. I want assurance that no other communities will suffer what ours suffered. I want guarantee that no other service animals will die protecting children from their own family's greed. Judge Matthews nodded slowly. Mr. Williams, your dignity throughout this process has been remarkable. The court notes that you could have sought personal revenge, but chose systematic justice instead. The gavel came down with finality. Victoria Sterling, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole on RICO charges, with additional consecutive sentences totaling 847 years for individual counts of arson, conspiracy, and bribery. As federal marshals led Victoria Sterling away for the final time, she turned toward Marcus with desperate eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry about your dog. Marcus tilted his head slightly, acknowledging her words without accepting them. Rex forgave you the moment he chose to save your grandson instead of seeking safety for himself. That's what heroes do, Ms. Sterling. They protect people who don't deserve protection. The courtroom emptied slowly. Justice finally served after months of meticulous legal work. Sterling Development Corporation had been dissolved, its assets distributed to victims of the arson conspiracy. 18 city officials faced federal charges. Detroit's building inspection and fire safety departments were under federal oversight. Most importantly, the Lincoln Community Center remained open, its programs expanded with funding from Sterling's liquidated assets. Marcus Williams walked out of the courthouse into Detroit's afternoon sunlight, carrying Rex's collar and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the underestimated ones, hold all the cards. Justice has been served with precision and dignity. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for the final chapter of Marcus and Rex's incredible story. The ultimate resolution will show how true heroes create lasting change. 1 year after Victoria Sterling's life sentence, Marcus Williams stood in the renovated Lincoln Community Center, listening to sounds that would have been impossible under Sterling Development's regime. Children's laughter echoed from the new gymnasium. The renovated pool hosted senior water aerobics classes. Teenagers practiced for their high school equivalency tests in computer labs funded by Sterling's liquidated assets. Rex's memorial statue occupied the place of honor in the main lobby, a bronze German shepherd in alert position with a plaque reading, "In memory of Rex, who taught us that true heroism means protecting those who cannot protect themselves." His final act of courage saved a child and exposed a conspiracy that threatened an entire community. Marcus ran his fingers across the bronze sculpture, crafted by a local artist who had donated her time and talent. The statue captured Rex perfectly. Intelligent eyes, alert ears, the unmistakable posture of a working dog whose mission was protection rather than aggression. He would have hated the attention, Marcus told Sarah Sterling Rodriguez, who visited monthly with baby Michael, now a toddler, taking his first steps in the same building where his grandmother had planned mass murder. Sarah had legally changed her name after the trial, wanting no connection to Sterling Development's legacy of corruption. She worked as a community coordinator at the center, helping families displaced by her mother's crimes find permanent housing and employment. "Uncle Marcus," Michael called out, his toddler voice bright with joy as he dodged toward the memorial statue. The child had no memory of the fire that nearly claimed his life, no understanding that the bronze dog represented his salvation. Marcus knelt down as Michael approached, the child's trust absolute despite, or perhaps because of, Marcus's blindness. To Michael, Uncle Marcus was simply the man with the gentle voice who told the best bedtime stories and always had time to listen. "Is that Rex?" Michael asked, his small hand touching the bronze paw. "That's Rex," Marcus confirmed. "He was the bravest dog who ever lived. He saved you when you were just a tiny baby." Michael nodded seriously, his toddler mind processing this information with the gravity children reserve for important stories. Rex was good dog, the best dog, Marcus agreed. The community center's transformation went beyond physical renovations. Federal oversight had resulted in Detroit's most comprehensive municipal reform in decades. The new city administration required public hearings for all development projects, independent safety inspections, and community impact assessments that actually involved community input. Victoria Sterling's former properties had been converted into affordable housing cooperatives, owned by the families who lived in them rather than distant corporations. The Sterling development model of extractive capitalism had been replaced by regenerative community ownership. Marcus had declined offers to run for city council, preferring his role as community advocate and unofficial guardian of municipal transparency. His security work had evolved into something closer to community intelligence, monitoring development projects, attending public meetings, ensuring that Detroit's recovery benefited longtime residents rather than displacing them. But perhaps the most profound change was personal. Marcus had been approached by the FBI's K-9 training unit about developing new protocols for urban investigation work. His methodology, combining a veteran's observational skills with the service dog's detection abilities, had proven remarkably effective at uncovering complex criminal conspiracies. "We want to create the Marcus Williams Protocol," Agent Walsh had explained during their meeting. "Training programs that teach veterans and their service dogs to recognize patterns of municipal corruption, environmental crimes, and urban terrorism." Marcus had accepted with one condition: all training would be conducted at community centers in underserved neighborhoods, ensuring that the most vulnerable communities had direct access to investigative resources. The program's first graduating class consisted of 8 veteran dog teams from across the Midwest. Their field training involved investigating suspicious development projects, monitoring environmental hazards, and building relationships with community organizations that needed protection from predatory corporations. Rex's legacy was becoming a movement. As evening settled over Detroit, Marcus walked his usual patrol route through Corktown with his new partner. Luna, a young German shepherd with her predecessor's intelligence but her own distinct personality. Luna was eager, enthusiastic, still learning the subtle art of community protection that Rex had mastered. The neighborhood had changed dramatically. Sterling Development's planned luxury condominiums had been replaced by community gardens, small businesses owned by long-time residents, and housing cooperatives that strengthened rather than displaced existing communities. Victoria Sterling's current address was Federal Correctional Institution Hazleton in West Virginia, where she would spend the remainder of her life in a 6x8-foot cell. Her appeals had been exhausted. Her co-conspirators had received sentences ranging from 15 years to life. Sterling Development Corporation existed only in bankruptcy court records and criminal justice textbooks. Marcus paused outside the former Morrison apartment site, now home to a community playground named Rex Memorial Park. Luna sat at attention, sensing the significance of this location through her handler's emotional response. "This is where it all started, girl," Marcus told her quietly. "This is where Rex chose to be a hero instead of choosing safety." Luna pressed against his leg with the intuitive understanding that all great working dogs possess. She knew she had large paws to fill, but she also knew her human would teach her everything she needed to know about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had become both a close friend and professional collaborator. The message was simple. "Channel 4 wants to interview you about the Sterling case anniversary. Still interested in staying out of the spotlight?" He smiled, typing back, "Rex was never interested in fame. Neither am I. The work speaks for itself." And the work continued. 3 new veteran dog teams were investigating suspicious development projects in Flint, Grand Rapids, and Lansing. The Marcus Williams Protocol was being adopted by community organizations across the country. Federal grants were funding similar programs in urban centers where gentrification threatened longtime residents. Victoria Sterling had intended to prove that money and connections could overcome any opposition, that vulnerable communities were expendable obstacles to profit. Instead, her downfall had demonstrated something far more powerful, that quiet competence, methodical documentation, and unwavering commitment to justice could topple even the most entrenched corruption. As Marcus and Luna completed their evening patrol, returning to the Lincoln Community Center where it all began, he reflected on the year's events with the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Rex had died protecting one child, but his sacrifice had protected thousands. Victoria Sterling had sought to destroy a community, but her defeat had strengthened communities across the nation. The blind security guard and his guide dog had proven that the most effective resistance often comes from those whom power never sees coming. Marcus unlocked the community center's front door, Luna leading him through the familiar corridors toward his security office. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats to monitor, new families to protect. But tonight, he could rest in the knowledge that sometimes justice isn't just served. It's served with the kind of precision that transforms individual victory into systemic change. Rex's bronze memorial caught the last rays of evening sunlight streaming through the lobby windows, the statue's alert posture suggesting eternal vigilance. The inscription below had been expanded to include a quote from Marcus's trial testimony: "Heroes don't seek recognition. They seek justice for those who cannot seek it for themselves." Outside, Detroit continued its long journey toward renewal, not the extractive gentrification Victoria Sterling had planned, but the authentic community rebuilding that happens when longtime residents have the power to shape their own futures. Marcus Williams settled into his security desk chair, Luna curling up beside him in the same spot Rex had occupied for years. His radio scanner crackled with the routine communications of a city going about its evening business. No emergencies, no crises, no conspiracies requiring immediate investigation. Just a community at peace, protected by those who understood that true security comes not from walls or weapons, but from neighbors who watch out for each other and refuse to let anyone, no matter how wealthy or connected, sacrifice the vulnerable for profit. Rex would have approved. And that's how a blind security guard and his heroic partner brought down an empire of corruption, proving that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most devastating truths. Victoria Sterling learned the hard way that when you fuck around with people who can't defend themselves, eventually you find out that some guardians never stop watching, never stop documenting, and never stop fighting for justice. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of ordinary heroes achieving extraordinary justice.